Hello there, Rex. Welcome to the Art of Feeling Better podcast. You are the extra special guest. Good afternoon, or should I say good morning? Because it's morning where you are. Perfect. And
There
your
we go.
hair looks fabulous, Rex.
So do you. You have a new hair look.
Yes, yes. Well, it changes like the wind, so I've decided to go. Yeah, we're sort of
Go with the wind. Yes.
unicorn purple this week.
The
It's
spring
good.
look.
How are you anyway? Did you have a nice break?
I had a fantastic break. I had a 4-week hiatus in Southeast Asia, including Singapore, which is my old base. I had done my part of my secondary school there through this GCO level back in the days when they had GCE exams.
Yeah.
And so partly in Singapore, a couple of days in Malaysia, about a 10-week jaunt through Laos, which was my first time. I've never been to Laos, and then also to Sri Lanka, and then back to
Oh,
Singapore. So by the end, I was physically a little bit worn out because between jet lag, the hot weather, but I met a lot of old friends, made a lot of new friends, interesting connections, going to new places and trying to learn from the people locally.
oh, it's beautiful. It's so enriching, isn't it? It's so, and like you say, your body might be a little fatigued from moving around, but it really fills your soul up, doesn't it? You get a lot of
It
value.
does. And I need time to decompress and
Yeah.
really assimilate a lot of the thoughts and have a chance to dig a little bit deeper into some of them. And I
Oh,
think what's interesting is, of course, Singapore is so cosmopolitan and multicultural these days. And traditionally, of course, it's a Southeast Asian country with um, numerically, by proportion, dominant Chinese, which
right.
itself means a mixture of different backgrounds. But and I don't want to use the term religion, but spiritually, it's probably more worshiping the big bucks these days. It's all
Oh,
about, you know, the 5 C's in Singapore: cash,
yeah.
credit card, clubs, country clubs, cars, and condos.
Oh,
But when you go
that makes me
know,
pain.
yeah, unfortunately, it's a driving force of much of the world. Emblematic, you can substitute little bits and pieces elsewhere.
Yeah, it is, and I think that's exactly part of the problem. Exactly why I wanted to catch up and chat with you today. So,
On the other hand, in Laos, which is, of course, a also an old country, and bits of it goes back to Angkor Wat,
yeah, Uncle
the
Mark, yeah.
yeah, to the 5th century AD
Yeah.
and or Common Era.
I'd love to visit
And
Uncle Mark.
more modern times, there's a lot of Buddhism.
I
And it
believe so.
was really interesting to see in the morning. One of the things to do in a place called Luang Prabang is to get up in the morning quite early at about 4:30 or 5:30. By 5:45, 6 p.m., the monks are parading through the streets to collect the alms coming up from the temples. And this is a tradition.
Wow.
They only have 2 meals a day. They have breakfast and they have lunch. And largely the food they eat is what they collect from people's sort of charitable givings, philanthropy. But part of the giving is giving back, really, because
Mm,
the monks in their pursuit are doing good things.
yeah.
They're and also it's interesting, some of the young monks are as young as 8 to 11 years old. So it's really an initiation. They're called novice monks. And it affords opportunity for otherwise poor country kids. Sometimes maybe their parents cannot afford to feed them even, and certainly not to educate them, to get them 2 square meals a day, a solid education, which includes the basics, reading, arithmetic, and so forth, but
Mhm.
also now a bit of spiritual teaching in the Buddhist texts and so forth. And then, of course, they have to give back service.
Yeah, it's exchange, isn't
So,
it? It's being of
yeah,
service.
it really is an exchange. They learn how to serve. They learn how to serve the community. And I think it comes back to learning to serve oneself, but in a positive, more self-compassionate, but at the same time, maybe less self-centered, if that makes sense. You know, you're actually
Yeah.
developing self-compassion, but in a way of not self-pity. The two are not the same, but
Yeah.
also much less self-centered. It's about a sense of service. And I think in modern society, very often we've lost these initiation rites, where there's a common bond. Now we can delve into the details and say, but this is only for males. Same with when I was with Anthony Willoughby in Kenya, the initiation rites for teenagers. That's primarily for the males. The women are left out. But I think we can really broaden the search for some, what Anthony would call primary knowledge
Absolutely.
that we should reinstitute. But it
Yeah.
needs structure.
Yes, it does, and that's the difficulty, isn't it? With so much wisdom to share, it's trying to get some focused action into structure. Because I agree with you, the world, we've lost our way completely, haven't we? We've lost what it means to be human, and I think from my experience, my whole life really has been instinctively about being of service in whichever way I can. But then I think I spent many years in my 20s going across the line the other way and self-sabotaging and being very much from my own kind of childhood issues, not valuing myself in the way I should. So it's learning balance, isn't it? And someone has to teach that, share that wisdom, self-compassion, self-respect, self-worth, but from a place that then enables you to be of service to your community and gives you strength and power so that everyone can be healthy and happy and share. And it sounds so like common sense, but it seems to be such a big thing for us to try and achieve, doesn't it? And you're a physician, aren't you? So if you do you
Yes,
mind
I am.
a bit of a background so that listeners, when we put the recording out, know a little bit about your background? Because I know health is a huge topic, and I am so grateful for your time chatting with me because I'm so interested in functional medicine and the holistic approach and trying to work out where we've gone so wrong. And you picked up on something when we were chatting with Anthony a while ago around the patients that you see constantly in your working life and in the ER room, presenting with things that really don't need the kind of medicine that you would give in a hospital. And I really I'd love to hear a bit more about your kind of background as a physician and what you think about that.
Sure. I think in a way, so first, my background, I tell people I'm from back east. And of course, living in the United States, where I've been for the last 47, 48 years, people assume, oh, must be Boston or New York or Washington. And I tell them, no, I was born in Hong Kong.
Really?
So, like yourself, at least one time, I was a subject of Her Majesty when
Absolutely.
Hong Kong was part of the Greater British Empire, whatever that means also. But we'll leave that discussion for another day. But then my parents, we moved to Singapore when I was around 10, 11, 12. And my formative years were spent in Singapore in the middle school years when we're beginning to ask those big hidden meaning questions of lives, of who I am, of what's my purpose, of where I'm going, and so on and so forth. Cutting short, then my parents sent me to New Hampshire, New England, to
Okay.
study for high school, to finish high school. So I finished high school and I also did my college in New England in Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Right. Okay.
And from there, then I moved west because my parents had by then decided to immigrate since the kids were not going back to the Far East. So I did my medical training at UCLA, University of California in Los Angeles. A whole bunch of my clinical trainings were also at UCLA and finishing off at UC San Francisco in pulmonary and critical care. And for the first, so I would say about 20 years of my medical career, I was very much focused on doing the academic thing, getting to the best white elephant that I can. So I was at University of Southern California. And for the last 15 years of my academic career, I was at Johns Hopkins on the East Coast. Hence, it's some truth I am from back east these
Yeah.
days. Although I'm fairly, as you know, nomadic. And
Yes.
right now, as we speak, I'm talking to you from California, from the Bay Area.
Are you? Okay, lovely.
I'm still doing some consultation work. And so my focus had been going from the very, very broad medicine to the very, very narrow pulmonary critical care, thoracic oncology, lung cancer diagnostics. So for about 15 years, I was focusing on thoracic oncology at Hopkins. But then along the way, I sort of realized that medicine can become, and I really enjoyed what I did, interacting with people from around the world. The name helps. And I was doing a lot of procedures called bronchoscopy, endoscopy, making diagnosis of infections or very often tumors in the airways, and doing some therapeutics, keeping things open. So definitely helping the individual.
Mm.
But then I also realized so much of our modern medicine have become very dollar short and a day late,
Yeah.
prescriptive in giving medications, this and that. But when we think, there's a saying that in the West, or at least in America, we work very hard for a long time to save up a little money so that towards the end of life, we can spend a lot of money to buy a little time,
Right.
sometimes not very high quality. And
Yes.
when I think about the diseases I see, both as a lung cancer specialist, i.e., smoking related diseases, and not putting blame, mind you, but smoking, of course, causes not just lung cancer, but people with emphysema and also heart disease. And similarly, when we look at common conditions, that's still causing the majority of deaths and lots of suffering along the way. It's things such as diabetes, high blood pressure, kidney failure, and the effects of what we call diseases of despair. Think alcoholism, think drug substance misuse, and again, smoking of all different sorts. And a lot of it really comes out of not the disease process, which is very interesting, different physiology and pathophysiology, but perhaps the biggest mystery of all is why we fall prey.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
going from a condition where early in medical school, I thought, well, psychiatry is interesting. They always say, well, if you walk into a room and the hair stands up at the back of your neck, there's some true psychopathology in the room. But I think most of us have psychopathology that are not hair raising to the extent, but day in, day out, how do we sabotage ourselves? How do we sabotage relationships? And that goes back a lot to who we are, what's our identity, and how do we help people develop the right identity, if you will. I shouldn't say right, because sometimes there's no single right, is there? But how do we help people regain a sense of self with compassion towards self and towards others, and move forward without causing harm? Because our first dictum in medicine, the old Hippocratic Oath, and this is true actually in all different cultures, is so-called primum non nocere, which in Latin means first do no harm.
Absolutely.
So, how do we go about first do no harm and then think about how to maintain health, the wellness, the primary prevention, and when necessary, how do we regain health out of illness? So, I hope that gives you a broad scope. So,
Yeah.
my certainly interest and what competence I have, quickly losing them, I suppose,
Never.
no, no, we evolve.
We do.
Is in healthcare and in health issues.
Yeah.
And so I strive to every day learn something new. And there's so much to learn, isn't it?
I love that about you, Rex, as well. Immediately, I could get that from you that you're just having such an academic background and such a lot of experience within a very technical field. Um, it would be easy for you to get ingrained in one school of thought and then fail to look at any different perspectives. But you really just, I mean, you've come across my own program, my Mindset Mojo program around disease dis-ease. For me, it's environmental. That is it for me. I think a lot of, especially the work that I do, and I work a lot with addiction of all types, and just really
Yes.
people suffering in a multitude of ways, whether that's overwork or just dissatisfied and ill at ease with their lives, and the physical symptoms that then manifest in time. If that's not seen to, obviously send people to the emergency room and send people to their GPs. When if we bring it back to the roots and actually start to help people to uncover, as you say, uncover who they really are and what matters to them and their own metrics of success and a life well lived, then I think for me, that's how we can make the changes and do that compassionately and empathically. So I love the fact that somebody like myself who presents in this way, and I'm wildly creative in Wales doing some pushing buttons and having interesting conversations and working in a very sort of spiritual and holistic way can have a really deep conversation with a physician, over in the United States, and a really powerful conversations without any kind of, nobody needing to be right or wrong or
Right,
conflict. It's
right.
wisdom, isn't it? It's just sharing experience and wisdom. And that's the essence of the Institute of Primary Knowledge, the thing that we're trying to bring together. How can we share that wisdom in a way that's accessible for everybody, that is, there's no pressure and there's no doctrine and there's no kind of judgment. That's the interesting topic, isn't it? How do we do that?
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful idea. A recognition that we all bring value, even though our background may be different, whether it be academic, non-academic, but we all have some lived experience. Now, some seem to gain it sooner than others. Of my three children, Anna, the youngest, we talk of her as being, boy, she is sort of a good wisdom, even as a child.
Also,
Yes, the
you know,
old soul, yes. Although when, it's good for change, we actually honor the term old, because I
yes,
think, of course, in society, everything is focusing on the new, on the technology, on the AI, and forgetting this sort of part of it is, I think, a revival of the slow movement, isn't it? And at the core of all this, not just slow food, slow eating, slow conversation, slow talks, but I think it is the idea that we need to go back and regain some sense that there is great value in slowing everything down, because key in that slowness is mindfulness. It's hard to be mindful when we're trying to multitask and rush along the day to catch deadlines only because we've overbooked things, overcommitted things. And so I think key to much is really the concept of mindfulness, which I know is a little bit squishy woo woo for a lot of people. But I think just we have to be conscious of our being.
yes. We are human beings, aren't we? Not human
We
doing. I
are.
think my
No, we are.
life's work is to bring the woo-woo into the room. That's my life's work, is to kind of translate that difficult language that people don't resonate with and try to kind of mediate that and bring those concepts, because being present, being mindful and without judgment, is just the most powerful and healing thing that we can do. We've just lost our way in how to do it, and we're either ruminating about the past, or we are panicking about the future, and we just can't stay still in our present space. And that makes me really sad, and I experience it myself all the time. But I think when you have a bit of knowledge on how that works and you have a little bit of a toolkit, then you can practice, and it's a practice, isn't it?
Yes. I love the idea of a toolkit. And for most of us, we actually have it. It's how to learn how to sharpen the tools, to use them, to know their purpose. And I think part of this consciousness raising is self, to develop some sense of purpose, some sense of self, and how to regain a sense of identity. And when I think of the social ills at the individual level, at the family level, at the community level, at the national level, at the international level, it's the sense of having lost the ability to communicate in an open way. But to communicate, we have to connect. And to connect, we have to know a little bit about who we are. And I do feel that there's been a great loss of identity, too much of an identification of identity as your job, as your education, as your socioeconomic class, what type of house, what type of car you're living in, what's your appearance on TikTok and Facebook and Instagram. The whole sense of focusing on what you fear you're missing out instead of being thankful and appreciative of what we have. And of course, we can all be so thankful for what we do have, even in dark times. And I think it's regaining that recognition, again, the mindfulness that what we have is in us already. And so, again, even in my recent trips, it is so interesting in a place like Laos, which again, it's landlocked in Southeast Asia. It's a one landlocked country. Vietnam on one side, on its east, Thailand and Burma on the west, a bit of Cambodia to the south, and maybe or maybe not a bit of China to the north. So it's the poorest country by far. It's landlocked, it's agrarian, it has lots of potential, but it's floundering under a government that's, I would say on air, my sense is very corrupt, lots of leakage. And yet, at the individual level, there's a certain grace by so many people who otherwise we would look at them and say, boy, they've got nothing. They're in the village, they're in the country, they're making a simple living, they're fishing, they're farming. And yet, there's a real sense of self and belonging,
Yeah.
of this identity that I think partly it's cultural and historic, but very much comes back to none of us, the whole concept, it's so true. It takes a village to raise a child, it takes a village to support an individual. So I think losing the community is one of the big challenges, and how to rebuild community. And it doesn't have to be a huge community. It could be a community of two or three, but it's all around us.
Yeah.
But
I
we
think,
do need,
sorry, go on. Go on.
no, it's just that we do need community, even though, we all also need alone time.
And it's essential, and it's part of the list of human needs. So I've been doing a little bit of training with the Human Givens Institute around the 9 emotional needs that we need to survive, not just to be happy, but actually for survival. And community is one, and time alone is another. And I think that they are the things that we've lost because we've been too busy striving for, technological advancement and trying to perform and achieve. And we have definitely lost our way. And I think you're right. It's about an excavation, isn't it? It's about rediscovering and finding what we already have that we've kind of lost our way with. But I also do think you're right, because over the years since I've run my not-for-profit, we've done lots of work with groups, and I instinctively knew that community had to be a focus. So I've spent a lot of years building various communities, but I've recognized in the last probably 2 years that it's not enough to do that, because people are so lost that the identity thing is the big barrier. The labels provides a real difficulty, because we can bring people together and try and form a community and hold space and facilitate. But each person is so embroiled in their sort of nervous system response 24/7 that they're trying to look for where to fit in and what label would you like me to have and what's the right thing to say. So it still isn't conducive to what we're trying to achieve. So I think you hit the nail on the head before, reflecting on my work. I think the individual identity and supporting that individual awareness of who you are, what matters to you, cultivating the ability to manage yourself and not look externally for validation or for fixing, and experience life in its, good and bad, and actually stand in your own truth authentically, and understand and appreciate who you are, what lights you up, what brings you joy, what you feel your contribution should be. And then bringing the people together that have those tools, for me, that's the magic. That's when community really lights up, because everybody has their autonomy, and they come to the table already with a strong sense of self. So they're not trying to fit in or prove themselves or compete. They just are. Their being.
Well, we're saying the same thing. You're saying it much better than I am.
No, I just, as you know, I just kind of, it comes out without my me thinking about it. But that's just my authentic reflections and feelings. I think it needs to, it's both, isn't it? It's the individual and the community. It has to be in tandem. We've got to do that. And do you think, from your thinking about your medical background, because this really, and I have no knowledge, it's not my background at all. I have sweeping assumptions that I make from what I would see on the TV and from the people I work with, and from my own life. But I'd love to know a percentage of the people that are presenting with, physical illness and, as you say, blood pressure issues and kidney disease and all of these things, how preventable that would be without any kind of intervention. If people had access earlier in their lives to this kind of approach and these kind of tools, whether we've cut the head off the body, haven't we? We treat the symptoms as they come up and plaster them over, but we don't connect the fact that there is something in there that could sort all of this crap out if we just learn how to do it. What's your perspective on that?
I think it's hard, Jane, to put a specific number to the percentage. I'd rather approach it in a sense that maybe, because in a community it's a bell curve, or it's a number of bimodal curves, isn't it? So depending on the disease condition, depending on the part of the community, some of it is socioeconomic, But then if we look at Western Europe or Western society, access to care is so different between the UK, which is much more uniform, or Scandinavia, the Western liberal democracies, which I do adhere to as a good model, versus the US, the richest country in the world. And yet, on a lot of metrics of health outcomes, such as childhood mortality and so forth, it ranks overall in the 20s or 30s. That's because the distribution is so multimodal. You have the wealthy who have the best of access to the Stanfords and the Harvards and the Hopkins. And then you have everyone, everyday people who may be working two jobs or unemployed and with no access to healthcare at all in the same city. Oops, excuse me. My
Duck.
apologies. You thought I had a duck next to me,
I
waking
thought
me
it
up,
was a
say,
duck.
feed me, daddy,
Yeah, I
right?
thought he got a duck with him.
Because otherwise, sometimes in a crowd, the phones all sound the same.
That's
So I
brilliant.
guess I am a mouth disruptor, and not that
Yeah,
I want to stand out, but often I find out that I'm a little bit off in a corner
the
in
duck will
terms
do
of
it.
my point of view.
Yeah, the duck
But
will do it.
anyway, when
Carry
I'm
on.
thinking of health, wellness, and outcome and so on, if someone asks me, so doc, how do I stay healthy and happy or well into an older age? I would jokingly say the first thing is I hope you picked your parents well,
Yeah, yeah, I get that. Yeah,
meaning genetics. So
ethical.
nature does play a role. So your genes you inherit can bless you with longevity because in trying to promote good health habits, there's always someone who say, aha, but I have my Uncle Charlie who smoked 3 packs, drank 2 pints,
It's
with
fine.
all sorts of other unmentionables. And look, he's 99 and a
Yeah, yeah,
half,
yeah.
never scratched his body.
Yeah,
Well, Charlie had good luck and good genes. But
yeah,
then beyond the nature, of course, comes the nurture. And the nurturing comes in several forms. One of it is, of course, developing the knowledge. And even with the knowledge, we can give everyone the best knowledge and indoctrinate in a positive way, health, healthy lifestyles, types of ways to eat, to sleep enough, to be engaging, not to delve into bad habits and so on and so forth. But then do you practice it?
yeah. And can you practice it? Have
And
you got
can
an
you
environment
practice
that allows you? Yeah.
the practicalities of, are you afforded the time to be mindful, to take a break, that you don't have to work two jobs to
Mhm.
support yourself and your family and live hand to mouth? So these are all different issues. But I think all in all, still, the part that we do have somewhat better control is in developing a certain sense of self-awareness, of
Mm.
self. And when you have a stronger sense of self, of course, we need 3 squares a day or 2 squares a day, a roof over our head, not to feel cold, to feel the sense of being safe,
Yeah.
being well cared for, being loved, that there's possibilities. These things are all very important. But then why do people not participate? And I would say it depends. Depends on the hospital I'm working at, depends on the location, and the type of hospital, the type of patients, very different in a veterans military hospital where unfortunately there's a lot more PTSD these days. Recognizing in America, more soldiers, ex-soldiers die from suicide than actually on the battlefield. And I
Sure.
dare say the same may be true in the UK as well,
It
right?
is. Mhm.
So again, how do we prevent? Some of it is prevention. Some
Yeah.
of it is providing the right nurturing and support throughout. So in a sense, it's no different from being in a family.
Mm.
So as a rough percentage, however, I would say for chronic diseases like COPD, emphysema, with smoking being the primary driver, some of the lung diseases being secondary to poor exposure to different carcinogens of mineral dust fibers, heart disease more and more due to obesity, diabetes, which is linked to obesity, and
Yeah.
realizing they overlap.
You
So
do.
if the heart disease is bad enough if you're have a congenital history of heart disease, but then you're stressed, so you have high blood pressure. You don't eat well, so you have high cholesterol. You don't eat well, so you end up with diabetes. You get the picture. And
Yeah.
then on top of that, you smoke. So
Yeah, you've got a
suddenly you're
crappy
proving the
life,
devil.
so you drink and smoke because you can't deal with it. You've got a crap life, so I'm going to smoke and
Right,
drink because
right.
it's the only way I feel better, and then that adds to the problem. Yeah.
Well, but that's of course part of the issue is Is it the only way? And how do we provide people with the right toolkits, as you mentioned, to redirect their ability to say, I'm not I'm not a victim of circumstances only. It may be unfortunate victim of the overall environment, but why are there always success stories? But this is, however, not to say that we do not need to have policies that support the average person, the better society.
Hmm.
And there are so many topics we can delve on, where you are on the socioeconomic spectrum, from education and so forth,
Yeah, there's a lot.
to the have-nots, and a widening gap that makes people upset and angry. But I think this is as important a time as ever. I have children. I believe you have children also. And
Oh,
so you have four.
oh,
You're a
yeah.
busy mom.
Busy lady. Well, they're all older now, so they're leaving
Oh,
the
I
nest.
see.
So yeah.
Well, you must have done tremendously well not to have aged through having four children
Yes.
and probably had joy having them.
Yeah, do you know what? I think that's what it comes down to is having, and people say it's interesting because it relates to what you're saying. A lot of it's a mindset thing, isn't it? I think a lot of the time because I tend to get people will say, well, it's okay for you, you're lucky. And I think, well, is it luck? I've had a lot of challenges in my life. I've had an awful lot of grief and trauma, and I've been through childbirth 4 times. I've raised 4 children, and we have the same challenges and difficulties as everybody else I come across, but it's a different way of dealing with things. And the gratitude you mentioned before, I think it's really difficult when you're in the middle of a horrible circumstance to try and pull out the learning and be grateful for the experience itself, as well as the things that you have.
Right, right.
For me, I think that's what it is. I mean, I started early. I was 19, no, I was 20 when I had Callum, and he's 25 this year. So,
Well, well,
and
well.
the baby
Yeah.
who's 6 foot, he's 16, and then we've got 2 girls in the middle. So, but yeah,
Mm,
it's a journey, isn't it? You're the same. You've got children. It's the journey of parenthood, being having a partner, being someone's spouse, all the labels that you put on. And
right,
it's
right.
keeping your own identity within that mix as well is the difficult bit. And I think you're right. Conversations are so important, and we can't keep putting them off because they're uncomfortable. So I'd love to do more of these kind of conversations, and hopefully by recording them, when we get a bit further down the line with setting up a space, the Institute of Primary Knowledge that Anthony is passionate about, we'll have this set of resources as a good
Yes.
starting point to have some conversations. I've been speaking to somebody, in fact, just before I came on with you, speaking to an amazing lady called Valerie around education. So we're doing a big piece of work around the education system. Health is another topic. All kinds of different enriching conversations that are relevant to every person. And even if they can be uncomfortable, great, brilliant, because that's where the learning happens. It's being able to sit in that space, isn't it, with the topics that are contentious.
Yeah.
Have them
And
regardless.
well, so what drives a lot of my thinking and decision making is what would be best, not just for me, for my bank account for now, but what would be best for my kids' generation and their generations beyond. And I think one of the uncomfortable thought, for instance, is, as I said, so many people in the current generation tie their identity to their occupation, if they have an occupation. And face it, with our children, it is said that on average they have 2 to 5 different careers, a couple of which may not have been invented.
Mm.
And I think the concept of whether or not it's AI, ChatGPT, generative AI, robotics, of taking away jobs, which will be very real.
Yeah.
So that in the future, I think unless we're preparing our generations beyond and ourselves who are vital in our work, we feel that we're in the prime of our lives and so forth, but we may be made redundant quite quickly by technology. So if you lose your job and your identity at age 45, you become despondent at one end, angry at the other, and all this is very dysfunctional.
And what is your
So I
purpose?
think,
What is your
yeah,
purpose? Point.
what's your purpose exactly? So I think part of the purpose is to repurpose ourselves, be prepared to learn new things. So learning something new every day and being practical in our learning somewhat, but not only in learning technical skills, but I think in reading history and reading the arts, developing the right side of the brain and not just the left-sided brain, as us STEM scientists types tend to do.
Vital.
Because
It's
I
vital.
think, yeah, vital to make those connections within us as well, not just between us. And I'll finish off by saying that I heard something very interesting from a current German philosopher I met. I won't tell you how, it was in Delphi, Greece at an arts festival. And this was a couple of years ago. So very often we all feel like our world is on the verge of collapse. And when we think back historically, while reflecting a little more the Judeo-Christian tradition, we talk about four horsemen of the apocalypse, don't we? And you can take the Old Testament version, the New Testament version variation, they're all the same. And I'm sure in other different cultures, they have the equivalent
Yeah.
4 or 5 horsemen, right, of the apocalypse. And they are used to be famine, pestilence, war, and something called, at least in the Old Testament version, wild beasts, which I think, I interpret as, is it black swan events or is it the bad personalities? Bad, I'm using a pejorative, the
Yeah.
dysfunctional personalities. Now,
Interesting.
nothing is good about any of these. We cannot say that famine or pestilence is a good idea or war is a good idea. But Christoph Quarsh, this philosopher, said that think the four modern horsemen of the modern apocalypse are thus technism, everything is driven by technical advances, dataism or dataism, everything about harvesting data for big AI, for generative GPT and so forth. Robotics, of course, being technism. The third is everything is determined and prioritized by economism. Is it going to make money? Is it going to be balancing the budget up front? And the fourth is something he called transhumanism, which is an interesting concept. I think it's like leaving behind the humanistic qualities because we can control everything now. And so I thought, this is very interesting because unlike the old four horsemen, where nothing can be said can be said about pestilence, famine, and so forth, we use technical advances every day. Robots have made maybe manufacturing better. Self-driving cars can be potentially safer. But what does it do for the humankind when the idea is the priority is towards economism and priority is losing our humanity? So I thought that was a sort of telling, challenging thought about where we are and where we could be going and how we make our decisions on a daily basis. Hopefully we have decent leaders, but we each have to lead ourselves. And then, of course, the responsibility of careful selection of who our leaders are and so forth. So it makes it, because things are moving faster, so it makes it all the more of a priority that we devote time and attention to become more wise in our own capacity. We cannot depend on, TikTok or on social media to tell us what is right or wrong or to guide us. It's really the cart leading the horse.
Yeah, and that's the frightening part for me because I'm fascinated by transhumanism. I think the whole, same as you, the whole concept, everything interests me. I love to learn. It really fascinates me. And I can again see both sides of the coin. I can see the good and I can see the bad. So, Mindset Mojo, the psychology and the mental health is one part, and it's based on the medicine wheel. So we then have some statistics, and we have body focused things and spiritual development and emotional development. And I was talking in my recording, sort of introducing it around blending the old with the new, and I think that's the way. I mean, I'm a shamanic practitioner. My heart and my soul is based in the old ways and nurturing and building in the old ways and respect and connection to nature, to the space we live in, to being human. But I recognize that we can't go backwards either. We can't go back to live as the old shamanic tribes did. We have to embrace,
Right.
well, we can't, it's not going to happen. So how do we make conscious, informed, compassionate decisions around that? And like you say, leadership is going to be key. But if we can use technology to do the good things. So I'm going to be building my courses and my information and delivering them globally using technology and using all these engaging methods that people want. And that's great because those old ways can be saved and they can be passed on. And I can bring people in like yourself and these amazing people I meet from all over the world. They can share their wisdom from their communities and from their cultures, and we can share that and keep it from being lost and create humans that are strong and wise and compassionate. And then it's just a different way of living, isn't it? If we have efficiency through technology and the workload is distributed through machinery and AI, great. But then what do? We can't be redundant. We need to get back to thinking, actually, we're meant to be living our best lives over here. We'll be working within our communities and sharing whatever we share and doing whatever we do. We don't need to be doing all the manufacturing anymore because there's something else for that purpose, but we do still have a purpose and identity. It might be different, but it's working out and recognizing what that is, isn't it? Which is
Yeah, very
difficult because our children, and the problem is, I think our generation, my generation and above, it's very different having these conversations than it is with a young mind that operates very differently because they've been raised with technology and trying to get this very old wisdom in a way that's understandable, relatable, and engaging for young minds, because they are our future. Future generations is what we have to focus on. That for me is my purpose, and the kind of challenge there is trying to make these things engaging and accessible, but create that internal locus of control and that sense of autonomy, and so that better choices can be made and people recognize that they don't need to look at people's hair colors or they're opening a box of crap on social media for you to look at. Like, stop the distractions. It's not that it's not important, because everything has importance, but it's a distraction from what matters and what will true happiness and a fulfilled life. It's feeding the beast, isn't it? It's feeding the not so great bits.
No, no, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy sometimes when we have to depend on hooks to get our attention
Yeah, and
rather than being more self-directed.
it's
Yeah.
hard, isn't it? Because I'm kind of, and I always have been, my old career in fashion and media and beauty. I feel like I'm in that space for a reason, and I have to use that for the greater good, if that makes sense. I kind of,
That's your core competency.
yeah, it's using it for the greater good. So I know that that's how people engage, and we can't get frustrated when we're over here doing the good stuff, saying, "Why are you ignoring us?" Because that's not how people want to engage, and it's not where
Right,
they're at. It's trying to find common ground and create that sense of safety to explore that, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, to explore
right.
self-actualization, what that looks like. And it's heartbreaking when if I work in schools recently, when I'm talking about the very basic Maslow, people can't get past that first bit. Even adults and teachers. It really, really concerned me a few months ago when I did a creative, sort of exploring this. We'll build a pyramid, we'll build a triangle, a pyramid, and we'll look at what we need to be our best selves. And everybody could put something along the bottom: house, job, I need oxygen, I need food. But nobody could conceive of anything else, because that's all. It's really sad. And I thought, oh, we need to do some work here, because this is
Yeah,
really concerning that people are just waiting to be told what they need to do next. They can't think about what they need to. And the safety thing, we were having a conversation around psychological and emotional safety is more crucial now. The physical safety is a given. We know we need shelter, and we know we're supposed to get a house and a mortgage, and a lot of people who make the decisions, I feel the decision makers have, that's their idea of safety, is bank account safety and having the house safety, and completely missing the psychological and emotional element. If people don't feel safe in their own bodies, they don't feel safe in their communities or in their schools or in their families, you can't do anything else. They can't learn, they can't, be
mm.
well, they can't achieve good health. So that's got to be a fundamental, really, is safety of self, isn't it?
I think it's a recognition of needs and
Mm.
also of how we build our assets. So you point out a very important thing. I think so much of our not just our generation, our parents' generation, the focus has been to build up the tangible assets. The idea that somehow, if we're good enough, we will work hard with or without different levels of education until, call it 60, 65. We have saved up enough tangible assets, hopefully without squandering. It's like the squirrel for winter. And then you have enough left over for your retirement, which in times past may have been 10, 15 years. And then you whittle away because the average longevity was it 75, or some countries it's still 60s, or is it 80? But as it turns out now, at least excepting for blips like COVID, the
Mm.
pandemic, more and more people are talking about living to be a 100. 50% of our children actuarially may live to be 100, according to statistics. Because again, in Western European society and America, since World War II, the end of, each decade has seen a rise in longevity about 2 years or so. So the problem is if we are 50% living to be 100, how many people could save up enough tangible assets by the age of 60, 65? So, of course, the young ones are all wanting to be the next Googler, the next unicorn, so that you can be a billionaire or at least a millionaire by the age of 35. But most
Things,
people
things.
won't. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
things. So I think the focus, and this is not my own idea by any means, but I really subscribe to it, is the concept of having to build up and maintain the intangible assets, not when we're ready to retire, oh, what hobby should I pick up? But really to develop it all along our lifespan. And it's our responsibility or our, if you will, a privilege as parents and mentors to
Yeah.
pass those ideas along when our children and those we can have a contact with when they're 5, when they're certainly by 10, 15, and so forth. And the intangible assets are, of course, continued education, continued connections, and interactions, plus healthful living, back to the health aspects of nutrition, of using food as medicine rather than consuming medicine as food, of having enough sleep, of exercise, which also helps the brain, prevents Alzheimer's. So it's all one big package. We cannot be neglecting parts of it until we retire, hoping that we've provided enough. It's a dollar short and a day late so often. And for so many people, that day is not even arriving.
No, they don't even get that far. And I think I had that revelation quite recently, really. I had that revelation probably a couple of years ago. And I've been on my journey, especially my self-development journey and my spiritual journey for many, many years since childhood. But the past 2 years, I've had a couple of real big penny drop moments where when I've been doing my own kind of in my shadow work, I'm always trying to pull up the roots and work out, why do I think like this? Why do I behave like this? What's going on? And I had a realization that I was doing just that. I'm because of the stuff from my childhood and what I've been taught by my community, my parents, and what good girls should do and what life should be like. And I was chasing, like constantly chasing, working as hard as you possibly can for as many hours as you possibly can,
Mm.
because one day, in a time that isn't now, your time might be valuable. There might be something that will happen that will be nice. And I was chasing that moment that was more important than this one. And then I started to have this real crisis of, oh, this actually isn't right. How do I move from that way of being to actually being present and appreciating and building it in that I can experience it along the way? So things like, music is medicine for us and our family. We love going to gigs and festivals, and I love my garden and nature. And so I made a point of starting to transition over the last couple of years so that all of the things that I would choose to do at retirement, or the perception of retirement, I want to do it now while I'm 45 and I've got my health and I
Yes.
can enjoy it. So I'm trying to balance the book and do all of those things now. And I can't see me getting to a point where I stop doing what I do. Even my work and my learning and talking to you right now is a passion. And this is what I will do, and forever. So I feel like I'm actually in my retirement now.
Oh, good. Well, planning
Difficult.
for a
Yeah,
retirement that will not come because you'll be
exactly.
engaged. Yes.
Yeah, because I don't want to reach a point where I'm too old to live my life. And I can, it feels like dread the thought of sitting there one day when I'm 70 going, oh, there you go. I've achieved it. What do I do now? Well, I
No,
can't.
no, no, no. Yes.
No, I want to, yeah. So I'm trying to embody that, and I'm trying to teach that to my kids, which is really difficult because everyone's hustling, aren't they? And everyone's trying to make the green. That's it. Money's, like you said, it's literally the apocalypse. We are bound by this desire or this need to obtain things and to have status and to compete and to have money, because we have to have it to survive. But I'm trying to help the people in my community and my own kids to understand, actually, yeah, I think I messed up with that. You might have seen me working 16 hours a day and burning out, but I think I was probably a little mistaken, and we do need to survive, obviously, but balance it out with living your life at the same time. So it's,
Yeah.
yeah, such wisdom to share, isn't it? And it's so sad to watch the way things are sometimes going, and you think, gosh, people are caught up on that, in that momentum, aren't they? Of not
Yes.
understanding the way what it is to be human. And I think that for
And
me, one,
mistaking wants for needs. Now, nothing wrong with certain wants, but
yeah,
I
yeah,
think really finding the right balance, and as you have said many a time, to be constantly aware
yes,
of what we're wanting, what we're thinking,
yeah,
yeah,
it is the
conscious,
awareness.
being present. And I think when we're more present, we tend to be more satisfied, more when we're more thankful. And of
Mm,
course, one of the other big tasks daily is also realizing that you cannot achieve all your wants or sometimes all your needs, and being able to let go of disappointments, of shortfalls. Because when we can let go and say, I'm still breathing, I'm still alive, I'm still the same self healthy, but
yeah,
why be miserable when you can be much more grateful? And I think the letting go and gratefulness goes hand in hand. And gratefulness is, I think, one of the most powerful self controlling structures we have,
yeah, I agree.
that most of us have much to be grateful for, even on a bad day, and not focus on the negative. Now, I'm not saying that simply thinking, oh, everything is sunshine and positive, my cancer will disappear, my, debts will disappear. But I think it gives us a better grounding and structure, not to panic, not to delve into the wrong response, which is to be dependent, to reach for what has maybe set us into the road of despair in the first place, but keeping us there in dis-ease, as you said.
I completely agree. Completely agree with you. And you probably answered one of my questions. So I had three main questions. So before we do wrap up, and I'd love to talk to you again. I think we could have so many great conversations on a variety of topics. But
Sure, I would love to.
that would be great. It'd be wonderful. But for this particular episode, I love kind of episode. It makes me feel like an influencer. I've been asking everybody three questions at the end, so keep some consistency. And I think you've really just answered the first one, which is a massive big question. And I've been asking people, how do we change the world? How does that look? What can we do to change to create that shift? So do you want to elaborate on that? Is there something different, or are you thinking the
Sure,
whole?
I think to change the world, we have to know who we are, where we are, who we are, what we want to do. We cannot change the world if we don't know who we are.
Yeah, perfect. That is a brilliant point. We can't. You're right. We can't. And we're always looking externally, aren't we, and trying to fix everybody else. But it's bringing it back to the individual. Yeah, identity
Yes.
again. Beautiful. So my next question is from the macro to the micro is if it had, is there one little piece of information that you could give to anyone who's listening when this goes live that might help them feel better just day to day in their daily practice? Because I thought if I speak to enough people, we can build ourselves a toolkit. And if everybody gives a tip of what they do or what they, what helps them to feel a little bit better, then we've got this
Right.
really cool opportunity. So any advice, anything that you think people could do?
I think what I had said before, being self-aware enough to be thankful for what we have, and being self-aware enough also to realize we cannot have everything. Constant, we're in what we call the dopamine nation. We're constantly wanting little hits of satisfaction, whether it be shopping, whether it be hitting on the phone, whether it be TikTok hits, and so on and so forth. And our worst behavior, smoking, drinking, gambling, inappropriate relations, and so forth. And part of that involves being able to be aware, but also being able to let go. If you have certain disappointments, you have to be able to let go. Now, you may have to let go of the same disappointment over and over. It could be relationships, it could be self behavior, it
Mm.
could be maybe we'll realize that I'm being unrealistic. I'll never be a concert pianist. I will never be a concert pianist. I'm not saying someone else won't be. So being able to let go of certain dreams, if you will, somehow.
Yeah,
So I think those two things are daily practices that helps me, certainly.
yeah.
Being thankful and being able to let go.
I think that's beautiful. I think that, I mean, if anything, if we could pass that on, I think those two are the fundamental things everywhere across the globe. Just gratitude and release, being able to be grateful for what we have and let go of what no longer serves us. If we could all do that, there will be a completely different place. So that is real wisdom there. Thank you for that. One more question, because for me, one of my big things is music. Music is medicine for me and my whole family. So we really love our music. So I thought I would create a Spotify playlist to go along with the
Uh,
podcast. So I've created a playlist called The Art of Feeling Better to go along with it. And I'm asking all my guests to pick a song, any song at all, that just makes you feel good. And I thought together we can all co-produce this lovely playlist. So I've had some brilliant suggestions so far, and people on Facebook have been sending me ideas. So Is there a song that if you are feeling a bit low that you would reach for and think, ah, this is gonna make me feel good?
Well, I don't know about making me feel good, but it always brings out all the emotions. It is Leonard Cohen's singing. You know Leonard Cohen, the Canadian singer.
Yeah. Yes. Which one? Leonard, yeah, go ahead.
Hallelujah.
Oh, beautiful song.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah, that really is that's real medicine. That's very emotive. He's really gifted musician and songwriter.
And gosh, when you read the lyrics, you realize it's not quite what you're thinking.
Yeah, really
You're
clever.
right.
Oh, I love that. That's going to go straight on the playlist.
Okay,
Beautiful.
go good. I'm glad to be able to contribute. That's my thankfulness
There
of
you
you
go.
giving me this opportunity to have this conversation of being further engaged. I got to know you a little better. You got to know me a little better. And it's part of our journey of engagement
It
and
really is.
connection.
It really is. And I'm so grateful too. I really am. I'm grateful to, the work that you're doing and for you giving me your time today. It really is that kind of energetic
Oh,
exchange, isn't it? Lovely.
oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you, Rex.
I look forward to the next session.